Welcome to the True Sight podcast by Oracle's Elixir, your source for in-depth analytical coverage of professional League of Legends and the rest of the esports world. I'm Tim Magic Sevenhusen. Today we're talking to LCS caster Julian Pastrytime Carr. How's it going, Pastry?
It's great. How are you, Tim?
I'm doing very well. It's been a huge week. A lot of things happen right at the end of the competitive season, right before free agency. Obviously, free agency is a huge thing. You know, Monday, everything opened. We had a ton of news flood in. Official announcements have been trickling out after that. But before any of that happened, the previous week, one of the most exciting events of the year in North America, the Honda Scouting Grounds, which has been happening annually since 2016. You were casting part of it. I was covering it really closely in partnership with Mobalytics, who is the analytical partner for the event and has been for a couple of years now. And you and I collaborated on part of that Mobalytics project, which was a set of power rankings. We each came up with our own power rankings for the 20 participating players, and then the Mobalytics, and they did some analytical, like statistical rankings as well. We kind of put all those together. If anybody didn't check those out before the event, there will be a link in the show notes after. And it was a lot of fun from my end. We came up with some very different rankings from each other, which is, I think, natural for these players. A lot of them are kind of hard to scout, but that made it really interesting to compare it. And I'm looking forward to kind of talking through those with you, both what we thought before, what we thought after, going through a lot of the Scouting Grounds event. So really happy to have you on the show and to talk through that. What were your impressions of the event overall as somebody who kind of like prepped going into it, and you've always kind of been into that kind of academy level, amateur level side of the NA scene? How did you feel about this year's Scouting Grounds event?
It's really cool. I think it's very different to last year, obviously, because we got to be in person last year. Like, we had the most amount of interaction with the players and the coaches and the staff that were all there, which was kind of a first. Like, you didn't really get to watch the games in years past, at least not easily. And you just kind of like turned up at the end of the week to cast the part that was actually getting broadcast. So
Yeah.
getting to be there, talk to the players, like be there talking to the coaches, watching their games live, hearing their comms was really cool. And so we didn't get that this year, but it was great to see all the games getting broadcast for once. So we kind of got an opportunity to like actually watch these players like play their games and develop and like do all the things that the event's supposed to do, which I think the end of the event, while a really cool celebration of the whole week, isn't really indicative of what's actually been happening. So it was a understandably diminished experience in some ways because there's a global pandemic still that exists. But I think as far as coverage and like total public exposure to the event, it's probably the coolest edition we've ever done.
Yeah, it is really interesting because, like you said, there were a lot of the COVID restrictions, like with everybody playing remotely, and that did cause some tech issues this time. Some players having connection issues and things like that had to be worked around. But it seems like there have been incremental improvements to the overall format and the presentation of the event. I think there's still a long ways to go to make this event the best it can possibly be, especially in terms of like getting it out there in front of as many people, getting them excited about it and watching and so on. But I think, yeah, like you said, the having the amateur scene casters come in and cast a lot of the games up until the finals day, that was a huge improvement to the experience. Even though, that was when we saw a lot of I think those first few games is when the player connection issues were, first coming up, and they were trying to figure out how are we going to deal with this, what's actually happening, all that kind of stuff. So it was a little rough at times, but actually being able to see them, and like you said, like being there in person, I have been to one of the Scouting Grounds events in the past in person, and being able to hang out in the room with the coaches and watching a little bit and kind of hearing the comms on that was great. This year there were some opportunities, again, through kind of the Mobalytics partnership. I was able to be kind of virtually behind the scenes in some of this stuff and listening to the comms in some of the teams and observing. And I think so I had a little bit of that experience, but it's not the same as being there in person. I think having the kind of the personal interactions with the players, that was why being able to interview some of them, which I did during the show, and have an opportunity later in this episode to hear some of those interviews with the players, was really cool because you get to kind of meet some of these kids and see, hey, who are they and what are they aspiring to, and how well are they handling the pressure of all the event. So yeah, I think it was really great. I think there are lots of opportunities that it's going to keep getting better. And what I thought was awesome about this year especially was just the crop of talent that came in. We've had some good years in the past. We've also had some years that felt a little more down, and it was a little harder to get excited about all 20 players. But this year really felt like some of the format changes they made in terms of qualifying and who was eligible to come and who wasn't eligible to come, it led to a really strong set of players. Who was really catching your eye the most coming in?
So coming I was definitely excited about top lane and support. Those to me seem to either have some of the most attractive players attending, or support was just really stacked this year actually, which was kind of wild. Like three pretty well-known players who are in that scene, plus someone I hadn't heard of but was excited about in Plux. But I think Niles and Tony Top were like the marquee players. Like I'm a huge Niles fan, and I'll probably keep talking about him, especially if he continues his career in either Academy or LCS, depending on how his 2021 pans out. But he and Tony Top were both very exciting prospects this year, and I was definitely looking at both of those to see how they would perform this event. And I think despite results not looking as good, especially like for where Niles and his team ended up, I think he individually still showcased like why he's a very promising player.
Yeah, it was really interesting because from my side, I think you could look at the pool of players who came in, especially with the supports and having names that we've seen before. Having seen Otto before, he role swapped from bot lane to support to come into this event, having seen Joey before, having seen Shady before, and you can kind of get excited about, these guys are still around and they're trying to improve. On my end, the part that got me really excited was all the people I'd never heard of before, because I hadn't been, up until starting to prep for this event, I hadn't been really deep in the amateur scene. So getting to see players like Tomio, who came pretty much straight out of solo queue and had like a 2-week stint on an amateur team, I'm pretty sure that's about it. People like Spawn and Rosethorn and Yunbi and names like this that I knew almost nothing about, and I had to go and try to learn about them. And that's the part that got me really excited, but not necessarily knowing how good these guys are going to be. And then there was the other players where they had been playing a lot in amateur, and there was a good opportunity to watch some VODs on them and see how good they are. And I think the amateur scene, there's a lot of structural change going into next year, but even without that, I think the amateur scene was starting to produce some really good talent this year. Were you kind of throughout the year, like I was saying earlier, it seems like you do keep a pretty close eye out of all the LCS casters. You keep a closer eye on kind of that academy and below academy level. Do you watch that throughout the year? Do you watch amateur at all? Or is it something you kind of come into scouting grounds and start to catch up?
Yeah, I definitely had to play catch up for amateur at least. Obviously, I've watched lots of Academy,
Yeah.
but for amateur, it's something I've been keeping my eye on. But actually, a big shout out to Niberia and TJ from that scene who helped me with some of my prep just when I was like, hey, these are the players that are attending Scouting Ground. I know about a lot of them, but if you have insight you want to add because you're more directly involved in these players, then I'd love to hear it and share it. So some of my opinion was informed by things I'd gotten from the casters in that scene, but I'm paying more attention as orgs like delve in a little bit further and develop their teams. And a lot of the names like people that have been around for quite a while. So it was as I did prep and look through, okay, what were the results for the qualifier leading in for Scouting Grounds? Which of these players do I know? Who am I hearing about just from hearing people talk? Or which orgs have brought on what players? It was something that like I'm excited to give more exposure, I guess, to next year when people probably, hopefully, watch Proving Grounds and see more of the amateur players integrated into the Academy ecosystem. So while I do keep it obviously close eye on Academy, amateur is something I'm excited to watch more of. It's just for this event specifically, I definitely had to play catch up.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, it was pretty similar on my end. I'm looking forward to all the format changes for next year with kind of all the tournament cycle going into the big Proving Grounds event. I think it's going to be awesome to see the amateur level players interacting with the academy teams and seeing, it's a great opportunity for players at that kind of tier 3 or amateur level to show maybe they can beat some amateur or some academy teams and catch people's eye that way and have a little more opportunity. Going into the actual set of players who were attending, and if we go to the power rankings we both did, like I said before, we did have some points where we definitely disagreed on things. Maybe we can just kind of take a look at, we won't go through the full rankings of 20 for each of us, but the top 5 you picked, if I scroll through this, so your number 1 was APA.
Yep.
Your number 2 was Niles. We both agreed on the number 2 for Niles. Your number 3 was Tony Top, and like you already mentioned, you were really excited about kind of those top laners. Number 4, they're sorted on the site in the averaged order of both of our rankings and
I've got
the Mobalytics AI ranking. Your number 4 was
NXI and Shady were my next 2 to round out my top 5. Have
Awesome.
my list.
So we've talked about a couple of those, and we talked about the supports and so on. Players like NXI and Yunbi, what jumped out to you about those guys?
So Yunbi
not Yunbi. APA.
Oh, not Yunbi.
NXI.
So it's funny. I was gonna put Niles as my number 1 pick, But when I heard about APA and how he played, I was like, man, this guy seems so good on his style of champions. And if he's that smart as a player, like he just feels like a player that doesn't take very much pushing to make into like a very, very strong player. Because a lot of the time with younger players, you're having to teach them like the game and the map and like how all that stuff works. And if he's already quite a cerebral player, I figured this was a person that could adapt very easily to just be like, hey, play Syndra now instead of Aurelion Sol. He's like, you got it. I know how to play that. And I also thought about how strong mid lane had been in past years. So I actually just gave him a bump based on his role
Sure.
over Niall, who I was originally going to put as number one. APA did not pan out as much as I hoped, unfortunately, and actually got the spotlight stolen by the other mid laners. But I still think definitely a player to be excited for, especially as he refines his play in his champion pool. Because again, like he has a very rare quality for a mid laner, especially a young mid laner. And given that he's still got quite a long time to go in his career, I think he's a player that should be able to break through at least into academy in presumably short order.
Yeah, he definitely didn't have the strongest showing of the players there. I think, kind of relative to expectations a little bit. He was having some of those connection issues.
Right.
He was working through some stuff, fighting against some things, and I hope that didn't affect him too much, but it may have. Um, I think that's definitely the type of player that you want to say, okay, like let's spend some more time in the tier 3 scene. Let's show that you can round out that champion pool a little more. Let's show that you can dominate some more. And if you can beat some academy mids in that tournament and win a round or two, that'll help you. That's the thing about the scouting grounds event is it's a capstone event of the year, but it's not. If the pro teams don't already know something about you going in, they probably should. This one event in this 1 week shouldn't be making up their mind about you overall as a player. It might help inform that quite a bit, but with someone like APA, you hope that a slightly subpar showing at scouting grounds doesn't completely, write his story from then onwards. What about NXI? So we both I think felt quite highly about him coming in. We're validated on that. He ended up being the MVP of the event.
Yeah. He got the bump, let's call it, right? And this is where we should probably just credit. And I wrote about this in the power rankings actually, where we just need to start giving orgs other than Cloud9 credit for their talent development. Now, granted, Cloud9 deserve all the praise in the world for what they've done over the past few years and like how much talent they've brought into the scenes. And I'm sure that will continue next year with the academy and amateur ecosystems merging a little bit more.
Yeah.
So hats off to Cloud9. Been a big fan for ages for what they're
Cloud9
doing in the
Academy is
scene.
shaping up real strong for next year.
Yeah, right. Like they don't miss, and that's a very impressive thing for such a storied organization. So Cloud9, big claps as always, but I think both 100 Thieves, especially 100 Thieves Next, and Academy, so the work that Kelsey is doing, and Golden Guardians also deserve a lot of credit for what they're doing development-wise. And 100 Thieves Next just like cannot stop producing talented players, it seems like. So like it was kind of a thing where Kenvi was just so good that like, and NXI apparently just played exactly the same way. But I was like, yeah, this guy's amazing. Like if he's half as good as what we've seen from Kenvi already, then like he's going to dominate this event, and that's kind of what happened. So in some ways, he got the 100 next bump, but he definitely deserved it.
Yeah, and I'd say like from a little more behind the scenes view, something that really impressed me with NXI, like watching him in the scouting ground circuit as I was kind of prepping for the power rankings, and I did end up ranking him. Did I put him number one overall? I did. I ranked him number one overall coming in, and so like from just like the observer perspective, I saw a lot of this really high aggression and mechanical play and those kinds of things, and I tend to be biased towards the player who's willing to pull the trigger a lot and has to be taught to pull back rather than the opposite. Somebody who has to be taught, kind of that the phrase I've had used with me is a killer instinct. I think it's easier to teach reserve than it is to teach killer instinct, and so that's something that we lost Pastry.
Oh no!
We just lost your camera. All right.
Bye. Well, I don't know where it went.
I'm not sure what happened here. I'll edit this afterwards. Oh, no, so I've got my...
Fix it in post.
There we go. Is that
better? Hey, I'm back.
Yeah, just something happened on my end. I'll tidy this up later. No worries, guys. Technical issues are fun. Not a problem. There we go. Just make sure I don't have any echo from your end. Cool. All right. Now that we're back on track, so I do think it's a lot easier to teach a player to reel it in a little bit, and so that helped me out with NXI. But what I saw, especially during the event, and being able to kind of listen in to comms and things like that, is I really appreciated how much he's actively thinking and communicating about the game, and being able to say, like, I think one of the really important things for a jungler is being able to say, okay, the next thing I'm going to do is clear top to mid, look for a gank, and if it's not there, I'm going to reset or whatever. Like you don't have to go through all the fine details, but giving your players, giving your teammates an idea of, hey, my next 45 seconds looks something like this. Just in case, because they've got to be focused really hard on what they're doing. They can't be watching the mini map and trying to guess what path you're going to take and all that kind of stuff. And not all junglers are good at that at that level. And he really seemed like he was really thinking actively, what does my team need me to do? What information do they need from me? Stuff like that. So both kind of the what you could see from the outward view and also from the kind of behind the scenes view was really impressive to me about NXI. I thought he was a very well-deserved MVP of the event. I think it was pretty clear going through the event, if his team won the thing, it was going to be him.
Yeah,
we all looked at Team Infernal and saw how well they were doing overall and thought, okay, it could be just about any of those guys, right? But his team, Team Ocean, came in and he was the engine of that team for sure. What did you think of the guys on Infernal? Because they did really well on the team overall. So the lineup there was Tony Top, Tomio, Copy. Was it Shoryu and Shady, I think?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
That lineup seems like pretty stacked for this event, and it showed in the week leading up. I feel like when I was watching their final play out, they just kind of lost track of like what they needed to do. Like individually, they're obviously very talented, and I feel like they got a lot of leads that way, but they weren't nearly as coordinated as Ocean, which is wild for, again, like these are both pickup teams this week, right? They had barely any time to play together and played League of Legends all day for multiple days on end leading into the final broadcast day. So it just felt like the individual talent was there, but they couldn't stitch like any sort of mid game together at all, especially mid to late. My goodness, it was rough out there.
Yeah.
But the Camper Tony plan was pretty good, and I'm sure that plan's going to come up again when we see Tony.
Yeah, whatever team you're playing for, I think that's how you get the most out of Tony Top is give him the counter pick, give him the lane pressure, and let him do his thing. A little bit of a broken blade kind of a player that way, and I'm pretty sure that's the player. Like for some of these players, I ended up picking like comparables in case we did infographics on them. We put that on there, and I'm pretty sure I picked broken blade as a comparable for him. It seems very apt.
That's a good one.
Yeah, so all 5 of the players on Infernal got drafted. And for those who aren't familiar with the event, so 20 players attend, and at the end of the event, the LCS teams each get to make 1 draft pick, and they do it in kind of reverse order of the summer finishes. This year, 100 Thieves traded their pick away to Golden Guardians as part of all the other transactions they made this offseason, selling 4/5 or 3/5, I guess, of the Golden Guardians roster. 200 Thieves, plus they signed who he had become a free agent. So, the draft pick was a small part of that package. All 5 Infernal players went, but the overall draft order, and I'd love to kind of talk through this with you and see, whether you would have done any of this differently. Immortals picked first. Yeah. Immortals picked first. They took Tony Top, who we've been talking a lot about. Mm-hmm. CLG took Yeon at number 2. Dignitas took Copy, so another member of that Team Infernal squad. Golden Guardians, with their first choice, took Niles, who I thought a lot of people, especially before the event, would have anticipated he'd be like, maybe the most LCS ready of the players here. So I think they probably felt like they got a bit of a steal at number 4 there. Evil Geniuses, number 5, went with Tomio, so the 3rd member of Team Infernal there. Golden Guardians took Yunbi with their the number 6 pick. Cloud9 went with Shady, and Team Liquid with Spawn, FlyQuest with NXI, and TSM with Shoryu. So, yeah, how did you feel paying attention to this draft? I think you were talking through it. Were you on the show during the draft?
I was interviewing all the players.
Yeah, that's right. You're on the interviews. How did you feel about those? Did any of them kind of catch you off guard?
I'm surprised how many 80 carries are on this list, actually. Maybe I just don't appreciate, like, teams want an 80 carry, right? But I typically feel like solo lanes and junglers get valued a lot in Scouting Grounds, so I was surprised to see so many bot lane players get picked up. But actually, the bot lane is, for being mostly a set of unknown players to me, with the exception of Shoryu, actually all played exceptionally well. Mm-hmm. Even Andy Bendy, who I had basically zero info on for coming into this event, showed up in a big way. So I thought 80 would be kind of overshadowed by how strong and known the supports were at this event, but I actually think all the bot lanes and bot laners played really well, and potentially have a spot on at least maybe an academy roster, if not a high-level amateur roster, because they all
Yeah,
played, really, really well.
I'd say from my perspective, I was almost a little surprised that Andy Benny didn't make it into the top 10. In that Shorio fell all the way to 10. And when last week I had Prussian on the show, and he does a lot of stuff. He was actually on the analyst desk during the draft at Scouting Grounds too. He's really well known in the amateur space as an analyst, and he and I did a little mock draft. And when he and I did it, we actually had all 4 AD carries, I believe, go in our draft, and I think 3 junglers. And this time around, there were 3 junglers. Yeah, and don't have it all written out in front of me, but yeah, a lot of jungle, a lot of bot lane. It's definitely it's one of those things when you have a lot of info about the players going into the event. Do you use that to say, hey, I feel really good about those players, or is it the players that you didn't know as much about before who you're more likely to get excited about because suddenly you feel like you're discovering them, right? You never know which angle these teams are going to take on it.
Yeah, especially given like all teams' needs are different, right? Like,
yeah,
you could need anyone from I need an amateur player to lead my squad to I need an LCS starter, right? Which are 2 very different responsibilities for fresh players. So every team having different needs. Maybe like if you have a high draft pick, maybe you're actually just drafting for potentially trade value, right? Because that player could be valuable enough that you could sell them to another team. But I think the signing period's probably short enough that wouldn't happen if that player didn't want to play for you. But
yeah. Well, that's the other part to this too, right? Because the draft doesn't like lock that player into your org for 3 years or anything like it would in traditional sports. You what you end up with is a 10-day exclusive negotiation period with the player, and so that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to sign with you. And in fact, we've seen several of these players already have been on Twitter saying, hey, we talked and they're not going to sign me. We waived the negotiation period, so I'm a free agent again, technically.
Yep. So within like 24 hours, 2 or 3 players I've seen were now free agents.
Yeah. And so, and that can happen. Maybe someone like Immortals drafts Tony Top and talks to him and goes, okay, he doesn't, he wants to take a shot at, like, maybe Immortals wanted to put him on their tier 3 team and see if he could play his way into Academy, and he couldn't. And he was like, no, I'm pretty sure that another org will give me a shot straight into Academy, and I'd rather go for that. And so they're right away, they're like, okay, we're on a different page here. Maybe the org just wants to, like, give the player something to feel good about, right? Like, we're going to draft you first. We're not going to sign you, but we didn't really feel we needed to sign anybody right now. But hey, let's celebrate who you are. And also in other cases, these orgs have had talks with the players already, and some of them they might know aren't going to sign with them, and already have maybe an expectation somewhere else or an aspiration somewhere else, and so they don't end up picking them that way either. For me, the big surprises in this draft were NXI going 9 and Shorio going 10, because NXI was the MVP of the event, and I thought looked like a really great jungle prospect. I think that's a bit of a steal for FlyQuest at 9. And Shorio, I think when a lot of people that I talked to, it came across as a fairly strong consensus that Shorio was the best bot laner going into the event. And during the event, I'd say he definitely looked like the best bot laner, even if you ignore anything ahead of time. So I'm pretty surprised that he fell all the way to TSM at number 10 there as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we both had Shoyu as the highest ranked AD on both our lists. Certainly mine did, although I didn't have him maybe as high as he could have been, because again, I definitely had the supports higher in my power rankings. But yeah, Shoyu is like an absolute wizard. He's really good, and it's one of those things where I'm surprised he's still in amateur, but I think that's a testament to the growing strength of the whole ecosystem in North America, where like academy level players are having to play down a tier, let's say, just because there's so many good players. But he seemed to be someone that is like obviously very hungry to compete at a higher level again at academy, and then I'm sure eventually LCS, because I don't know why else you'd become a pro player if that wasn't your ultimate goal. Part of me with Shoyu feels like there's maybe some like, oh, we've like seen this player before, we've worked with him, we've seen him play in academy already, like not that interesting, right? Like, he's a known quantity. And I think for a lot of the more veteran players, especially that attend this event, that's a label that gets slapped on them quite often, whether fairly or unfairly. So I think maybe that's part of why he fell down so low, because teams maybe wanted to take a chance on a player they didn't know as much about or that they talked to, and felt like they could mold into a certain type of player depending on, again, what they wanted the player for. NXI getting drafted that low is criminal, though. That was so surprising because we knew he was the MVP. Obviously, like we were setting that up. I think maybe even before we started the draft itself. And we were like worried that he wasn't going to get drafted.
Yeah.
um, before the MVP interview. We were like, hey, how you feeling? Nobody picked you, but you're the best player at the event. But thankfully, he did get picked up. But I was very surprised to see, even though I think Tommy was really good, and actually probably the player that surprised me the most at this event, I'm shocked he wasn't drafted at least top 5. Like I could see you wanting one of the 2 top laners. I could see you wanting maybe a solo laner, but ninth is, again, I think I agree with you in that FlyQuest got a steal because that's criminal.
Yeah, well, and I brought up NXI as one of the players that I interviewed actually, and I brought up with him that another number 9 draft pick jungler was Blabber, actually, in his Scouting Grounds year. So he wasn't aware of the parallel, but now he's got a lot to live up to. And we'll see what happens, whether he signs with FlyQuest, waits that out, and goes somewhere else. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of him. Even if he has to play his way up from Tier 3 into Academy, I think we're going to be hearing his name a lot.
Look, if he's on 100 Thieves next, it doesn't take long, all right? They speedrun players into the leagues. Let me tell you, they've had so many people move through LCS and Academy. So, yeah, NXA has got a bright future for sure. Also, I did go through all the old drafts and was very surprised to see Blabber drafted that low.
Yeah, it's so easy in retrospect, right? To go, oh, how could they not see it? And maybe right. Some of them did see it. Maybe people kind of knew, hey, maybe Cloud9 had talked to him before the event and said, hey, we'd love to sign you next year. And so other people kind of were scared off of him for that. I don't know. There could have been a lot of context behind it, but either way, the place you go in the draft, in traditional sports too, you get some really late round draft picks who end up having great careers and guys who go undrafted and stuff like that. So it doesn't define you. And even, the 10 players who didn't get drafted at this event, we could definitely be seeing a lot of them in the future. And with the format changes to Academy and Amateur, we definitely will be having more opportunity to see all of them. So that's going to be exciting. Looking forward to kind of watching that, watching all that next year and having a closer eye on it. So at this point, if you're in the audio version of the podcast, I'm going to take a minute to kind of round off the coverage of the Scouting Grounds, kind of recap by playing out some of those interviews I did with some of the players. So I hope you enjoy those, and then we'll bring it back and talk a little bit about offseason to follow that. All right, so Pastry, let's continue the conversation. Let's talk about LCS offseason because that's the the follow-up topic. You have one of the best parts of the year. You've got Scouting Grounds. It's so exciting. And then there's this little thing after, just the dessert on top of the great meal. Right. LCS offseason happens. A couple of players move teams, Yeah. It's kind of cool. It's a neat little thing.
It's cool.
Wow. What an offseason. And it is not over yet.
This feels like the longest offseason already, which is kind of a wild thing to
days,
say.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. But usually feels like on day one, like everything happens, like all the rumors circulate, and then almost always they're true. Mm-hmm. And then within 24 to 48 hours, everything's confirmed and like we're good, right? That's how offseason feels like it works. That is not how offseason is working this year, apparently.
No. So it's Thursday, November 19th. Free agency opened on Monday. And we have less settled now than we did 2 days ago. So, there's a lot of information out there. There was a big free agency show on free agency opening day, which the Evil Geniuses organization came in and kind of helped save that show after ESPN Esports shut things down. So there was all of that, and actually a lot of things were settled out from that. There were still some holes. We didn't know what was going on with Golden Guardians, and we're still waiting to see on that. There are some gaps in the Dignitas roster still, a couple other pieces here and there that there's not a lot of information out. But then everything kind of shifted up a little bit as it's been, Jacob Wolf was reporting that the potential deal for TSM to sign Sword Art is falling through due to like taxation issues and things like that. And that's putting the potential trade of TSM getting Huni from Evil Geniuses and sending Lost in exchange. Now they're saying, hey, we can't do this trade if we don't get Sword Art, all these other complexities. Now we actually don't even know what TSM and Evil Geniuses rosters are going to look like. Man, and those aren't even the biggest stories of the offseason so far. What have been the biggest moves to you that you've been most like interested in or excited about?
Let me think. I think So I think biggest move and thing I'm most excited about are very different. I think if
Sure.
you want to go to big moves, Golden Guardians getting blown off is a pretty big one.
Yeah.
And going to 100 Thieves, which has now been confirmed. Yes. Man, it's hard to keep track of things I'm allowed to
Yeah.
say sometimes. That has been confirmed today, though. And then, like, Afari coming to TL, Santorin moving to TL, so TL doing their regular thing of buying the best players after the season ends continues, which is a lovely tradition we have. So, those are kind of like, and Licorice leaving Cloud9, which we knew ages ago, but now he's rumored to be landing at FlyQuest, I believe. I don't know if that's been confirmed yet. FlyQuest did tease something funny today, but their rumored roster seems really cool, and I think they're playing into the rumors, and I suspect that roster is going to be what everyone thinks it is.
Yeah, so like what's been reported by Jacob Wolf and other sources is Licorice, Jose Diodo, why am I blanking on a couple of the other pieces? Palafox, Johnson, and
Johnson, yeah,
and Diamond. And the FlyQuest photo that they tweeted out, you guys can look it up on the FlyQuest Twitter. It's pretty funny. It's like a desk setup, and the desktop background is a diamond. There's a box of licorice on the top of the shelf. Like, I don't know how they represented Jose Diodo or if they did it all.
There's an Argentinian flag in the top left.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that. Yeah, a couple of them I couldn't quite tell, but they have clues in there entirely, and they're not leaking anything.
No, they're just showing a nice picture of their desk.
Yeah,
it's very wholesome, very very on brand for FlyQuest.
Yeah, and then wait until they release something and two of the players are different. And they're like, look, the clues were in the photo. They're just baiting us on other ones. Yeah, so that was a pretty big deal. And we haven't even identified some of the other stuff yet. So G2 has officially announced Perks is not going to be with G2
He's
next
out of
year.
there.
And all of the
where's he gonna go?
Yeah, all the Perks Watch stuff has been for a while now. They've been talking about, hey, he's going to go to Cloud9. That hasn't been officially confirmed yet.
Nope.
So, until it's actually announced on Twitter by the actual org, it's not official yet. But, it's been pretty widely reported. Apparently, so like Travis Gafford was saying that he had some material shared with him about the Cloud9, like the $500 fan package, and there was like a clip of Perks in that package somehow. Maybe that was some kind of a troll. I'm not actually sure.
That would be a very Cloud9 thing to do.
Yeah, right? So, that's a pretty big deal. That's a pretty big move. And I think that kind of sets the league up so far on paper to be mostly a two-horse race between Team Liquid and Cloud9. I think most people would agree. Do you feel that way? Do you feel there's a team that could break into those top two with them, assuming those rosters are the ones that actually happen?
No, on paper, though, it doesn't seem like any team is nearly as good as that team, right? Like, I would put a lot of faith in Golden Guardians, but they're moving teams and they're changing top laners, and like some days, I'd say an upgrade to Haunter, but I think Haunter is also very, very good. So it's not necessarily true that like with a change in infrastructure, that team is as good or better than it was before, even though I think all the players on that roster are talented. I think FlyQuest, who have been our back-to-back finalists this year, have a completely different team. And even though I like their roster a lot, it's actually probably the roster I'm most excited about because there are academy players moving onto that team, which will be really fun to follow and see them perform. But like as far as like pure on paper strength goes, like TL are always going to be good, and they seem to again found a way to buy more talent to get stronger. And Cloud9's roster was already ridiculous, and now it's like it's very hard to understate how stupid Perks' career is. Stupid in a good way. It's he's so good. Like he's so good.
Yeah, it's huge, and we don't know what TSM and Evil Geniuses are going to look like, with all the other stuff going on there, not knowing how it's all going to shake out. But with the rosters that were being reported as the potential rosters there, might have been contenders into that top two. Definitely top 4 or 5, I would say. But now we don't actually know how those are going to land, whether they're going to be able to compete. So yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say Team Liquid and Cloud9 are the front runners. Do you have a favorite between those two?
Oh man, it's whew. um, it's tough, right? Because like Cloud9 losing Licorice is a huge deal, which is one of the reasons I think the rumored FlyQuest roster is so exciting.
Mm.
Because Licorice is just such a strong player, and his teammates are the whole team. Like again, FlyQuest having to rebuild their back-to-back finalist team is like going to be a
Yeah.
huge story in the offseason. I'm excited to track how they do. But like Fudge is an exceptionally good player, but he's very new. And typically, I have a lot of faith in Cloud9 rookies. But Reaper being gone from this team might mean things develop a little bit differently. Like, not to say that Rainova and Westrise and Rapidstar unfortunately had to go do military service, I believe. So he's not
Yeah.
with the team anymore, which sucks. But like, they still have the core of their coaching staff that have been trained by Reapid, and I have full faith in that team to build up the new players and continue to do the Cloud9 thing of being successful in the LCS while still developing talent.
Mm-hmm.
And Fudge is an amazing player. Like, the best player not named King from Academy this year,
Yeah.
right? And we would have probably been more hype about King if he'd gotten to play 2 splits, and unfortunately he didn't. But Fudge picked up so much of the slack of that team, just became its MVP when his team needed another carry as hard as their old AD. And he's now, like, his career is ridiculous, by the way. Like, he's literally gone from OS Challenger to LCS, and he's hopped every step. He's like, oh, I was in Oceanic Challenger, now I'm in Oceanic Pro League, now I'm in Academy in North America, and now I'm in LCS in like every year, and he's going to Worlds too. So like every year,
don't forget that the jump he made from Challenger to OPL happened from spring to summer, and after that summer he went to Worlds with the team, right?
Yep.
Like he went to Worlds, then he came and won Academy twice. Here's something that I'm not. It might be a little too extreme, but I would say that Fudge actually was more impressive in spring than summer and was the MVP of summer. Does that?
Yes,
like,
that is true.
and part of the reason that he didn't show off quite as much in summer is because he didn't have King in the bot lane to be kind of the cross map counter or like pressure point, and so he had to carry so much more of the load himself, which is a heavy burden to bear, right? So it was harder for him to kind of show off, and yet he carried that team so hard.
Yeah,
like anybody who's like a little iffy on whether Cloud9 is gonna get a good player in Fudge, like, don't doubt this guy at all.
And then they have their whole other team, and I got Perks, who is I think the best Western player of all time at this point. Like, certainly right now he's the most successful and the best. So his expectations are huge, like maybe more pressure than any import has ever had coming to North America. But like, this is the kind of player that doesn't go anywhere or do anything not intending to absolutely crush face wherever he goes. And Niski was great when he was good, and I think he's going to have a great career still. Rumored to be going back to LEC. I don't know if that's been confirmed yet or not. I have no idea. But that's what the grapevine says. But like, Perks is just a better player, and I don't think anyone's going to debate you on that.
No.
So given how good Cloud9 were already, even if Fudge is worse than Licorice, which I think coming in is a fair assessment, right? He's just not as good or not as known yet. Perks more than makes up for any difference of Licorice leaving the top lane and adds so much firepower to a team. Like, the only thing that might be weird is like he's moving countries at a weird time, playing with new teammates in a role he hasn't played in a little bit. Right? Yep. I don't think it's going to take him very long to adjust back to mid.
It's been one split, and he was really good in his split in mid and spring. So yeah. I think like the only place where you could say anything about like Perks isn't a big gain on Niski is he costs a lot more. Like, that's it. So yeah, that's something to be very excited about. I do think Team Liquid's going to be really great in their own right as well, right? Like, this was a team that did really well. Even though I'd say they weren't getting as much value out of Broxa as they hoped, I think it definitely rounded into form more towards the end of the year, but still, like, they expected, I think, quite a bit better performance there. And Impact, really solid top laner, but not quite the same, like, dominance as what you're expecting to get from Afari, where he can just crush his lane opponents so much. You know, the best laning top laner in the LEC. A lot of people would say just the best all-around top laner in the LEC. Mm-hmm. You're just getting a lot more hands and skill out of him than you were seeing from Impact, where you might have a little less like veteranship or maybe leadership or kind of things like that. Maybe a little less ability to kind of play without resources and kind of be the sacrificial lamb while the rest of the team succeeds. I'm not sure, but I'd say on paper, pretty much everybody would say Alfari is a big upgrade on Impact, which is no denigration to Impact. Uh, where do you see this team kind of like? Are they on even footing with C9? Are they half a step behind? Do you think
I
they
think
just have more all around?
it's really close. Well, I think if every player is playing to the top of their ceiling, I might say Cloud9's a little bit better, but I think going in, they're both very close.
Hmm.
Team Liquid might even be slightly ahead. I think their team's a little bit easier to figure out how
Yeah,
to succeed, especially early on
pretty
in a split.
straightforward.
It is going to be a longer season though next year, so we'll see how that maybe impacts how the teams develop. But like Alfaro is an absolute stud. Centauran is like unrealistically good. Like again, Team Liquid did the thing where they just found the
Yep.
best player and bought him, and now
Yep.
he's on Team Liquid. Congratulations. Jensen's still an absolute like monster. Like he was already amazing, and now Bjergsen retired. And yes,
Mhm.
Perks is very good. So I think a worthy replacement for the power vacuum left by Bjergsen. But
Absolutely.
Jensen is still an absolutely incredible player, and Tactical turned out to be among the
Yeah.
best ADs in the region, and Cloud is probably still the best support. So like,
Yeah.
there's Team Liquid don't ever downgrade. They side or upgrade, and they've continued to do that. So there's no reason to think this shouldn't be a good team.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think you do look at like 100 Thieves with the chance to contest that. I think some things have to go right for 100 Thieves, and probably some things have to go wrong for both Team Liquid and Cloud9 for that to happen. You have some question marks on how EG and TSM will shape up. I think FlyQuest would need to have a massive, like a really steep growth curve of how well they improve over the course of the year. And maybe it happens, like you said, it's going to be a long year. Based on what's kind of been reported or rumored out that there's going to be kind of a whole year long season, and if that does happen, then maybe by the end of it, FlyQuest has had like Palafox had a really good growth curve towards the end of the year. Diamond has been around, and maybe he's ready to make a really big leap. Licorice is still very good. All these things, if all of those pieces come together just right, maybe FlyQuest can get back. And we did not expect them to make two finals coming into 2020. So you never know what could happen with them. I think it's going to be an awesome LCS season, even though we don't know all of it yet. I think that the league as a whole has leveled up quite a bit. And sometimes we come into these off seasons and we say, some of the teams got a little better, some got a little worse. I'm not, you're scratching your head on some of the moves. I think there's relatively very little head scratching this time around, right? Like there aren't a lot of moves you'd go, I don't know about that one. There may be a couple things, but it's more like, I'm not sure. Like more like rather than, boy, I really don't like that they signed that player. So from my perspective, it seems like the LCS is getting a lot stronger.
For sure, I think it's just continued to get better year over year, and I think again, like the teams that are investing in their talent are finally seeing payoffs. Like
Yeah.
we saw so much movement this year of teams like moving academy players in, just trying stuff, and I think there'll be more of that next year. Again, with amateur and academy kind of marrying up in a lot of ways, like you're going to get exposed to more players. Like, the thing that the internet complains about all the time where NA doesn't have any NA talent and like there's no chance to develop, like very clearly, right, I've heard that complaint and slowly addressing it. Like it's not a perfect fix, certainly, but there should be an improvement. I think as teams take their bench and their junior and their tier 3 teams more seriously, the better results they push out as an organization. And I think Cloud9 has proven that over the years. I think Golden Guardians and 100 Thieves are starting to prove that. I think teams, as they pick up more talent and invest more in their organizations, unsurprisingly, are having better results. So I think there's a good mix of very exciting imports and exciting newer players or players that maybe people aren't as familiar with, and then chuck in all the fact that a bunch of very talented OPL players became NA residents out of nowhere. You have a very high-powered LCS and academy, and with amateur being mixed in there as well for even more NA talent development, there's no shortage of strong players. And I think the complaint that there isn't any NA talent comes from people that haven't never bothered to look what actually is out there. And if you actually looked at amateur even this year, you would see that there's a lot of really promising players out there.
Yeah, and they're gonna need time to kind of grow into that promise, right? And hopefully they'll have the opportunity to do that. If you don't already watch a lot of academy, hopefully the tournament structure that is coming into place will encourage you to watch it. And I think it makes, like, tournament viewing is more fun, I think, for fans than league view. You get to have the hype of, best of 3 or best of 5 series. You get to have teams, making a run to the finals and all that kind of stuff. It's just exciting. So I hope that draws a lot more fans in and gives them more exposure to the players who have been at this level. Because, when I tell people, yeah, I watched everything in Academy in 2020 and I did weekly coverage and all that kind of stuff, the most common reaction I get is, oh, why'd you put yourself through that? I'm like, no, actually I really enjoyed it. You watch it with a different lens than you'd watch like LCS or LEC or Worlds or anything like that. You watch it from that lens, you get excited about who these players are and who they're becoming, and you watch their growth over the course of the year. And that's what I'm most excited about in 2020, is getting to see more of that growth. And I hope that, both as the players grow and as the LCS grows, and hopefully that these on-paper upgrades we're seeing, hopefully they actually come to fruition. And a year from now, we're talking not about, another rough year at Worlds for NA. Hopefully we're talking about some teams out of groups and maybe quarterfinals wins and all that kind of stuff and leveling up. But I think we're starting to see some things get set on the right track for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's, as always, going to be a very exciting year for the LCS in 2021. And that's after a very exciting year this year, which is very impressive given how many games had to be played from apartments.
Yeah.
And
it's looking like that's going to be the case again for at least a good portion of next year, if not the whole year. So,
next decade, just that's it now. It's just our lives. I'm never leaving this apartment.
Oh, I hope not. Oh man, my kids are growing up in the middle of this. It's so weird to hear my kids talk about. This morning, my 5-year-old said something about, "Oh, do you remember that time we saw?" He was talking about like spiders or something. We saw a tarantula like in a box, like a zoo kind of thing. Yeah, we did it. It was a long time ago, before the virus. He says.
Yeah.
I go, oh no, your childhood, 20% of your life has been spent like under the COVID restrictions. This is rough. Anyways, hopefully that doesn't hold back. I think esports has been weathering it fairly well, at least the League of Legends ecosystem. I think some of these other esports are really struggling with it, which is unfortunate, but. We'll deal with it. We'll move on the best we can.
I don't think you sign perks if you're not confident.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, you don't sign perks if you're not confident in, wanting to keep things going in NA League, regardless of whether or not it's in the arena or not. Clearly the teams are very much invested in performing well.
Yeah. I was going to say, are you going to be casting a lot of Academy again next year? Or are you going to
yeah. Awesome. So I don't know. So here's a very small peek behind the curtain, everyone. I have no idea what's happening next year. I'm a full-time employee at Riot. I'm a commentator, and I'm primarily working on NA products, which includes the LCS and Academy. But I've really enjoyed helping build out and grow and commentate Academy this year, and I would be shocked if I wasn't asked to be a part, if not a major part, of coverage for that next year. So. If they ask me, I will say yes. I'm almost certain they'd ask me, and I'm very excited to cover plenty of LCS and Academy next year.
Very cool. Yeah, production on Academy is definitely ramped up year to year as well. As they didn't used to cast every game, and now they do Academy Rush to at least have them on screen in some ways and so on. It would be interesting to see whether that comes back for next year or maybe some other experiment with the format. But it's great to see that Academy is being pushed out to the audience, and again, I hope people really engage with it and do well. So. Anything you wanted to leave the audience with, Pastry? They can follow you at Pastrytime on Twitter. Anywhere else people can kind of find you and interact?
Catch me on Instagram, The Real Pastrytime, if you're interested in that kind of thing. Otherwise, I'm super active on Twitter. That's the best place to catch me. Otherwise, stop complaining to me about lack of NA talent. That's my number one ask. I've decided that I'm sick of not voicing my opinions, even if they're sometimes a bit strong. There was that Reddit thread recently about NA is a full import league, and I just went off on Twitter being like, hey, that's not true. Yes, NA is a very import-heavy league. No one is debating that, and certainly that will likely be the case for the lifetime of this league, so ideally after I'm long gone from here. But I think make the conversation less about either extreme and actually look at what's happening, because if you do, you'll see there's a lot of very promising, very exciting League of Legends being played just in North America. So part of my job has felt like bringing the lesser known players more to the forefront of the different leagues they're playing in. And with the changes to Academy and Amateur next year and LCS on top of that, I'm excited to continue doing that and talking about players that maybe wouldn't get a shot otherwise.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening. You can support the True Sight podcast at patreon.com/OraclesElixir. You can subscribe on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or at anchor.fm/TrueSight. And make sure you check out the Oracle's Elixir Discord server and hang out with us there. We love to talk through data science and also League of Legends esports news and other things like that. So links for all these things will be in the show notes, as well as for Pastry's socials. And for the Scouting Grounds coverage, the Mobalytics power rankings we did together, and all of those things. Thanks again for listening. Catch you again next time.